Hello, my name's J.Cook and I'm here to talk to you about a paper I've co-authored with Debbie Holley. Our individual work and leisure learning all increasingly intertwine in the same place. Under COVID, this can and could typically be our home. However, the space and ways in which we collaborate are as yet not fully understood. So, our contribution to the edited book on hybrid learning spaces is as I say, to be published by Springer soon with Debbie Holley. Frames our hybrid learning space pedagogy and the zone of possibility, or ZOP, through 3 case studies, which are outlined there. So the purpose of this short talk, probably 20 minutes, is just to give you a flavour. There's a link to the full paper, the author's final draft, at the end of this screencast. There are the 3 cases on the right. The research question that drove us through this and previous work is that in the context of hybrid learning spaces, which I'll come to in a second, how can the design process and design thinking advance or bridge successful communication and an understanding of social context in a zone of possibility, or ZOP. As I say, refer to the paper, the link's at the end, but here I'm summarising the key approaches and concepts that we want to work through. I want to work through in this short talk, and we'll go into detail in the paper. So the work is positioned along an axis of 2 axes of pedagogical theory and with practice, and we look at implications derived from 3 case studies, which I'm very briefly going to outline in a minute. We frame the whole approach by educational design-based research. So a definition of a zone of possibility is a very social constructivist approach, and it's a place where individuals can overcome the constraints of expectations and power structures to effect desired change. So what do I mean by hybrid learning spaces? The edited book goes into great detail in this, and we do in our chapter. But I'm particularly looking at the kind of I and Debbie, formal and informal learning, physical and digital learning spaces, and then other concepts are space and place, and something that arose in our work is called interpenetration, where we get this physical and digital intermingling, which is a very interesting concept, and we found evidence of it in our case studies. Bridging is mentioned in the research question that drives the work, and it's an example of bridging would be a tutor putting a student in a study group. But I want to just read the quote from the paper about this. Is that bridging arises when people from various backgrounds make connections, entering social networks that offer more inclusive opportunities. These kinds of networks literally create bridges, which is that they allow people who might not have had the possibility to encounter one another in their daily lives the opportunity to become acquainted. So that's a big concept of what we're looking at in the zone of possibility, and in particular dealing with the power structures and how to get around them. So briefly, the 3 case studies. Please do refer to the paper, link is at the end. The Bristol Jazz Workshops are, as well as being this one was about informal learning in the community. All 3 workshops, I should emphasise, had to go to online when COVID hit, but we had worked face to face before, as all the case studies people typically had. They'd been face to face, and they had to go online here. The Bristol Jazz Workshops, I was the observant participant, but I'm also the double bass player on it, so you're about to give you a music clip and hear me playing. It was an informal learning in the community. There are about 10 participants. You can see them there in this Zoom call. We used observations, evaluations, and field notes, and analysis of video calls, text and images, all obviously used here and elsewhere with the participants' consent. Bridging was important of digital literacy, and designing for interpenetration came across as big issues. And so what we do was we created this music. I used something called Ableton 10, Ableton Live 10, and we all worked remotely to create this music. So here's a bit of music to entertain you. So that's Ricardo Bossa Nova, the output of one of the outputs of our online work with colleagues and friends with the tutor in the Bristol Jazz Workshops. The second case study is Goethe University Frankfurt, where I'm the tutor in this case. It's a formal learning online, and 12 participants were face-to-face in 2019 and 7 online in 2020. These were compared. I do short courses on digital learning. Again, questionnaires were used and tutor field notes. Informed consent was obtained again. Here's some of we used Adobe Connect in this case to talk to each other. I was the tutor. A big thing that came out of this was that we need to follow iterative critical thinking cycle pattern that came out of this, which involves introducing short concepts introduced by me, very short lectures, then using breakout groups, which is possible in Adobe Connect and Zoom, fairly easy actually, where I don't go in to get around the power imbalance a bit, so they can discuss it. So these breakout groups are a move away from the power imbalance, and we've got some great results there. And certainly get to the paper and have a look on that if you want to look at a more formal learning approach. In the third case study is Debbie Holley, my colleague and friend, she went online to teach nurses. There is a semi-formal setup. About 62 nursing tutors were involved, so they're training the nurse tutors, and they are experts in their field how to get online, cascaded to 5 departments and over 150 individuals, so quite impressive. Used learning design and followed a case approached by Knoll in 2013. Holley was the co-facilitator, and in particular, one thing they came up with was a vocabulary of digital learning success framed by a community of practice. And the learning design supported staff by offering mechanisms for scaling up. So, as I say, these are brief feelers for what we went through, what we got in these rich sort of case studies. They came up with findings that both from these perspectives, and they are summarised in the paper, from the conceptual, methodological, pedagogical, bridging, and interpenetration. So if I, for example, and I'll come to this at the end, I draw out a few of the findings at the very end, which is coming up quite fast, which is good. So one of the outputs of all of this was a meta-design principle called Respect the Learner's Zone of Possibility. And we used a template which came from a lot of work by Yeshe Moore, which is described in Cook et al. 2020, which is a BJET journal article which I co-authored with Yashay and Patricia Santos. So that we used that approach where we framed the improved meta design principle through description, theoretical background, and tips in terms of challenges, limitations, trade-offs, and pitfalls. So that's something people could look at to take forward from this work to use in their own areas. Coming up to my last slide, I think, apart from the outros of references and the link, I think all the cases illustrated that interpenetration is an important hybridity concept and needs more work. This relates to the design thinking aspect of the research question I gave you at the front. In the first case study, we had Fred was recording the piece to send to me, so I was building everything up layer by layer. People would play it onto a drum track. We'd put the bass and the keyboards down, and then we'd send that to people with the tutor's the tutor's approval, and that would come back to me. So he was trying to record this in his room, and his son suddenly burst in asking him questions, and amusingly, Fred kept playing his solo that I was recording, pointed to the door to get sort of telling him to get out. His son, he was shouting "Why?" and on his recording you could clearly hear him say that. So you've got this digital learning going on in the home, and you've got the recording trying to take place, but you've got the home life intervening with the learning, that's the interpenetration between the physical and the digital is quite interesting. Came out in all the cases really. In case 3, interpenetration between the material and the virtual became the norm as students and staff learned very quickly to harness their mobile devices. These are people who don't normally do kind of mobile-based learning, but they used it to access learning on the move in a complexity of different spaces. So that's the Bournemouth case study of nurse tutors. I think bridging digital literacy which also relates to the research question, was sometimes problematic in all cases. Sometimes people didn't have the right equipment when they were trying to record online. They didn't know how to use microphones. This is case study 1. One chap managed to get the best results for recording his saxophone by recording in his wardrobe. And that's kind of, if that isn't interpenetration, I don't know what is. But it's people who were prepared to try things out, and I think this is the same in all the case studies. Okay, so there are our main findings. Here are some good references, the 3 key references that we think you may want to look at. This is the one I mentioned, which has got more work on meta design principles. Here, I'm going to leave this up for a few seconds. Is there a link to the author's final draft of our book chapter for the Hybrid Learning Spaces book, Spring, edited by Yashay Moore, Yanis and Christian. Okay, so if the work has prompted some interest, please do get back to me. My email or Debbie's email is on the front slide. Thank you.